All right, we are recording now. What's up, everybody? My name is Juwan Rohan, and this is the Misguided Podcast. We're intend to guide you to a better future. I'm sitting here with Allison and Dylin from Retire by 45. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. Thanks, Juwan.
Doing great, Juwan. Thank you.
Of course, I appreciate you guys coming up here and talking. And you're about to drop some real good knowledge on how we can retire early. So I'm super excited. I'm super excited to have you guys, and I'm really excited because you guys are from the Bay Area. So I love this, and maybe one day we'll sit down and have some coffee together.
Exactly, that'd be great.
Yeah.
We're craving human interaction.
Oh man, I am too. And I have a 2-year-old who is just craving socialization from the kids. And I took him to the park yesterday, and he's everywhere. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to interact. Right. So it's
I think we've all forgotten,
Yeah. True. There's no more handshakes. It's like weird. It's like, how do you, right. What do you do? Yeah.
Exactly.
Very true. But let's go ahead and get right into it. So who are you guys? And let's let the audience know why I'm interviewing you.
Ladies first.
So my name's Allison, and I'm originally from New York, which is actually where we met. We moved out here about 26 years ago now. So we're Bay Area transplants, I guess you'd say. We worked in the tech space, not as developers, which is like the normal profession for people in the FIRE community, which, in case your listeners don't know, FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. We were in the technical space. We worked at a bunch of startups and along the way. But our original, when we first met, we were restaurant servers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In Times Square, New York City.
Oh, you were busy.
Yeah, in the mid 90s. And it was a theme restaurant called the All-Star Cafe. So kind of like the Hard Rock Cafe, but for sports. And it was owned by some of the celebrity owners were Shaquille O'Neal, Andre Agassi, Ken Griffey, Joe Montana.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big time people. So you guys both worked there at the same restaurant?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were both restaurant servers, and we kind of saw each other across a room, like at the beginning of a shift. And
she stalked me, Juwan, and she lured me onto the volleyball team that we had. I had never played before. She's like, "Oh, he's tall. He's 6'3". We're going to put him on the volleyball team." And she was a volleyball player in high school. So,
nice.
But that's how we met. And Alice, as Allison said, we moved out to the Bay Area in the mid 90s. And so we've been out here for quite a while. And we'll talk, I'm sure you'll ask us questions about what we're doing now, but essentially what we did, or what we've been doing for the past 6 years, is working on a website called retireby45.com, where we blog, and now we're also authors as well. So
love it. Wow, that's crazy. That I just meeting at a restaurant. It's almost like a movie, especially in like New York, Times Square.
Right?
It's like you guys is a movie. That's cute.
It was pretty cool. I actually moved there from Columbus, Ohio, that's where I went to high school and college. So
okay.
It was totally kind of blew my mind. I was living in Manhattan at the time. So working in Times Square it was really wild.
Yeah, that's cool. What made you guys go to the Bay Area? Both crazy places, both very vibrant, especially in the 90s. So what made that move?
He wanted to go out to San Francisco for vacation. He had never been. And I had been there because I actually was looking at colleges when I was in high school, and I looked at Cal and I looked at Stanford. So I'd been there before. And so we just came out here on vacation and just never went back.
Yeah.
It was so funny, Juwan. Yeah. When we got out here, we just sort of fell in love with it right away. And we just called up our boss and was like, "We're not coming back for any shifts.
Yeah.
We're just going to stay out here."
Yeah. Well, how'd you guys find a place to live?
Oh my God. Wow. It was tough.
It's really hard to find a place to live when you don't have a job. And it's hard to find a job when you don't have a place to live. So we were living in like the weekly, like a weekly hotel in the Tender Knob. So it was just like rent a room for a week, and then we would run up to the Hilton over on Van Ness Avenue with a roll of dimes and go to the payphone and call people looking for jobs and looking for apartments to rent, and it was it was kind of a weird.
Yeah, it was before cell phones. I had a pager.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I actually had one. It was my dad's though, but I had one.
Yeah, so that's pretty funny. Yeah, so that was the only way that people could get a hold of us was through my pager. And I was actually trying to be an actor at the time too, so I was using my pager for trying to get acting gigs.
Yeah,
it was a weird time, but it was a lot of fun.
Nice. So when you got to San Francisco, did you find, and you guys got settled in, you said you worked in the tech industry. Did you work for some tech company out here? There was a startup or something, or?
Yeah. So, it's funny because we both worked at the same startup for like a week.
You guys love working at the same job, huh?
Yeah, both worked in customer service, and then I had an opportunity to work at a consulting company as an executive assistant, and I thought, well, one of us should probably go into this, stay in the startup world, because who knows, back in the late 90s, nobody knew what startups were.
Yeah.
But everybody knows what a consultant is. So I thought, all right, one of us should go into the stable side of things, and then the other one can go off and kind of do weird, quirky things in startups, and we'll see, at least there's like, some stability. So I worked for a company called Anderson Consulting, which eventually became a company called Accenture, which is one of the top consulting companies out there. But I was an executive assistant for 3 years. So, kind of supporting other partners, booking travel for them, writing, creating PowerPoint presentations and that sort of thing.
Okay.
She was always the smarter, more stable person, Juwan. So
and you were the riskier one?
Yeah, I think so.
Pretty much.
I worked for the company that I started with in the tech sector was called Home Shark. So like Loan Shark, but for homes. And they had like all these sharks as their paraphernalia and their mascots. Okay. And then they realized that it sounded too much like Loan Shark. And they were like, okay, we're trying to do mortgages here. It doesn't sound very good to be compared to a loan shark. Yeah. So they changed it to I Own, which also wasn't a very good name, but back then everything started with an I or an E, like E-Loan and whatever, eBay. So I started in customer support as well. And this was the late 90s. And eventually my degree in college was in marketing. So I eventually, after about a year and a half working there, I got an opportunity to go into marketing with another tech company. And that one was called Real.com. It was a movie site like Blockbuster. So they did DVDs through the mail. And so a lot of this stuff is like, it was before its time. So they were doing DVDs before, Netflix. I think
they were doing VHS tapes. They actually had a brick and mortar store in Berkeley.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah. But it was like the one store versus, Blockbuster at the time was thousands of stores.
Yeah.
And they were owned by Hollywood Video, which I don't know if you ever remember that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I know who that is.
And all those companies are no longer around. But that's how we got started. And we won't go through all the companies we worked at because we worked at a number of them. But I always tended to work for smaller ones, and Allison worked for a couple of bigger ones like eBay and StubHub. I worked for some smaller ones that you may be familiar with, like Lumosity is one. They do brain teams. I worked for them for a while. I was the head of marketing there. And I worked for a company called Tickle, which originally was called Emo. They did online quizzes and tests and personality tests. So they were also a little ahead of their time. Yeah. And they did online dating.
So you definitely were the riskier one who took the like little weird quirky jobs, and she took the more stable ones. Well, that's good. You have to have balance,
Exactly.
And I mean, that goes to, balance in life, but also balance in investing. So I'm sure like you're like, oh, we should invest in Tesla. And maybe she's like, oh, let's go with Microsoft, or, you know what I mean? It's good to have that balance, so, but yeah, I want to talk about I was reading, and correct me if I'm wrong. I want to talk about kind of how you were forced into this freedom lifestyle. And what I mean forced by is that I think you both lost your jobs within a month of each other, and we're like, okay, well, we're just going to go travel, and realize that's what you actually like love doing, and did not go back to work. You want to go into detail about that?
Yeah, sure. So at that point, I had kind of like gotten bit by the startup bug. And so I was working at a startup And Dylin was at a small, like a tiny company that was maybe 20 people, and he got laid off. And we're like, all right, well, it was like the fourth time he'd been laid off, so it was no big deal. At that point, we had actually moved. We had sold our condo in San Francisco and moved to Oakland, which at the time the price differential between Oakland and San Francisco was probably about half. So we did what we like to call geo arbitrage, where you move to a less expensive location, but you still maintain your current salary.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved over to Oakland, bought a condo in Jack London Square, and paid off our mortgage. So for us, that was a huge financial burden off of our backs. Like the only thing we had to worry about from housing was property tax and our HOA dues. So that was an immeasurable relief. So when Dylin got laid off, it wasn't really that big of a deal because we at least had my income and we didn't have a mortgage. And then, fast forward 4 weeks later, I get laid off.
Yeah.
And, my first reaction was, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Now we can go travel. Because the thing with two people working working at the same time is really hard to coordinate schedules and find a time that fits both people's schedules to go traveling. And we
especially when you start at different times, you have to accrue like your sick leave, your vacation. So it's very difficult.
And also like the type of work that we did. So Allison was a project manager. So when she would start a project, she'd be on that project for months, and you can't take off in the middle of a project. And so that was a little challenging too. And I was always in charge of marketing, and marketing, there's a little bit of seasonality to it depending on the product, but for the most part, it's kind of hard to take a lot of time off. And so we would carve out sort of like small vacations here and there, but we weren't able to really go out and do like a couple of weeks in Europe or things like that. And so that's what we found was something that we really enjoyed doing once we had the time.
Yeah.
And we always thought we'd go back to work.
Right. We tried. We when we got back from our vacation, we updated our LinkedIn profiles and we updated our resumes and sent them out and went on job interviews. And frankly, people were just miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this one guy that Dylin interviewed with, I think he said he was going bald because he was pulling his hair out.
I think I couldn't tell if he was joking or not.
Yeah. You're like, why would I want to work here after you just told me that?
Right, exactly.
It was one of those food delivery services that's no longer around. But yeah, I mean, we just realized like we weren't curing cancer. We weren't like Allison's dad doesn't want to retire because he's building skyscrapers in New York City. Like we weren't doing things that were necessarily like improving the world or society. If we were, maybe we would have kept on working, but we were just working jobs that were occasionally fun and interesting and challenging.
You were just working just to have the income to pay the mortgage, but you already had the mortgage paid off. So I want to go, were you listening to Dave Ramsey before? Like
at that point. So when, after we like went through a bunch of interviews and realized that this was just ridiculous, Dylin was looking at our finances and realized that, maybe given what, our current expenses and how much we have, he did the math on his hundreds of spreadsheets and realized that we had kind of like backed ourselves into this concept. And, up until then, so that was 6 years ago, we still had never heard of any of this, the FIRE movement or Dave Ramsey, until 2 years after. So we were just kind of like floating around on our own, thinking we had just kind of, created world peace in a way. Like it was just like this concept of, oh my God, we can actually retire, and trying to explain to our friends like what we were doing. They thought we were crazy.
Well, it also wasn't like a big thing back then as well. Right. It was no, I'm going to get a corporate job. I need to get a corporate job. Like even entrepreneurship wasn't a thing. It was like the entrepreneurs were hidden and people, didn't really believe that you were entrepreneurship. I don't even think the word was there, but that's super interesting because, a lot of people, they say, I want to retire by blah, 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 but what are you doing in the moment to make that happen? So even though this retirement kind of came out of nowhere and bad circumstances from being fired from your job, you kind of were already prepared. So were you like taught financial literacy young? Like, how did you just have that stuff in your bank? Like,
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, and we could talk about our one of our two books later, for Investing for Kids, because one of the reasons we wrote that is because they really don't teach financial literacy in schools. And so we didn't have that education growing up. Allison had a little bit from her parents. They were a little bit more savvy with their money. I was raised by a single mother who was a waitress actually her whole life. I grew up very, I wouldn't say poor, but definitely like kind of paycheck to paycheck.
okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And so I just, I was lucky. I got into a good school system and I got a good education. And I married a very smart woman who also like knew at least like the basics of finances pretty well. And so we got interested in, I think, well, when I mentioned that I worked at that company, Home Shark, what they did was mortgages online, and they were also way ahead of the game. But that got me interested in real estate. So we bought our first condo in the late '90s in Actually, that one was in Oakland, in the Oakland Hills.
Oh, okay.
And we bought it for $186,000. So
Jesus.
as you know,
do you still have it?
no.
When'd you sell it?
Yeah, we sold it a long time ago. We
okay.
bought it in '99 and we sold it like a year and a half later because we wanted to move back to San Francisco because that's where we were working and our friends were there.
Yeah.
But it got us interested in real estate and we started buying and selling places over the years. So that got us initially interested. And then I think as far as stocks, we just were like, let's just invest in a 401k at work. And it just started with that.
Right.
So you guys were heavily invested in your 401k. Did they match at the time?
No.
Oh, okay. Wow, you did it all alone.
Yeah, I know. When people talk about getting 401k matches now, I'm like, oh, you kids.
Yeah.
You don't know what it was like back in the day.
Yeah.
No, we had no 401k matches. We didn't have RSUs and all that fun, like
no ETFs. I think.
Yeah, right. No, it was strict. I think back then the big fund to buy was Fidelity Magellan, which is like an old closed. It's a closed fund. I don't even, it was funny because we didn't know, like we had no idea what the, what expense ratios are or front load, back load, all that stuff. It was just okay. Well, what looks good? What did really well last year? Let's invest in things that did really well last year.
You know what it sounds? It sounds like pretty much the whole time you guys were just misguided in a way, right? But like you guys had no idea about any of this, yet you were learning it along the way and just like, we'll figure it out. You just kind of had that like nonchalant attitude, like, we're invest here. Yeah. And it worked out. It worked out.
Yeah. I think I watched a couple of Susie Orman shows on PBS back in the day. So I knew that there was a concept of retiring and like, 401k. So I knew like that much, but yeah, the idea of, you have to put in X amount over X amount of time and compound interest, that sort of stuff was just like.
You're like, what?
I think I read a little bit of Warren Buffett. I read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a couple of those books, which in hindsight, I don't know that I would necessarily recommend them. They're not too bad, but yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Juwan. Like we were doing the right things without realizing it. Like we were just
perfectly said. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so we definitely made some mistakes. Like Allison said, we didn't really know, like when we had a 401k, we didn't know where to allocate the money within it. And so I did know that diversification was a good idea, but I made a really weird choice in my 401k. I said, okay, diversification is a good idea. So I'm going to put the same percentage of every single thing that they offer, and without looking at what was in each of those funds. I think my company at the time offered like 12 different funds, and I just put like 8% in every single one.
Yeah, and living very modest. A lot of people forget that.
Yeah.
You can't just invest and then still live the same way, or else you're gonna fall into debt. So which is another thing some people don't know. Well, we're gonna talk about it, but your book goes into like very good detail of explaining everything perfectly laid out in like almost like a chronological order. But we'll talk about it in a minute. I wanted to ask because it's a super random question, but it just shows how there is such a lack of financial literacy in the education system. And I don't understand why, right? But like, I was gonna ask, like, how many times in the past year, or how many times in the past 10 years have you used the Pythagorean theorem? Right?
0.
I'm not even sure I remember what that is, and I went to science high school. So
how many times have you done your taxes?
She does them every year.
I actually do our taxes.
Yeah.
So why don't we learn taxes in school? Like,
Exactly.
Right. Especially
it's kind of sad because my parents got divorced about 10 years ago, and my mother is now on her own, and she has to do her own taxes, and she is petrified. She's
my mom is too. My mom is
7 years old, and she's convinced that the IRS, if she's off by a penny, the IRS is going to come and throw her in jail,
FBI,
for the rest of her life. And it's I don't know if it's a generational thing, but there is a lot of fear in the older generations about money, and talking about money. You don't talk about money. You don't talk about salaries. It's just a taboo sort of subject. And I think as we're moving along in time, people are becoming more comfortable with it. I mean, I'm sure your generation some people talk about money all the time.
Some people flaunt it.
So but yeah, it's definitely something that I wish schools did focus more on, the more practical things in life. Because frankly, I mean, I studied French in high school. Have I spoken French since then?
Maybe
when we go to France, I do, but it's like.
That's been the Pythagorean theorem, though. We can use French when we travel.
They offered like pottery classes in high school. The pottery classes, they offered like random electives, right? You had to choose an elective. Yet nothing about money was an elective. Right. Nothing about computers was an elective until maybe obviously after the .com. But like it's just ridiculous, like. Yeah, coding should be a elective. Now it is, but back when I was in high school, coding was not an option.
Wow.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, we're a lot older than you are, but when I was in high school, one of the most useful classes I took was typing. And the reason it was useful is because now, then once computers became prominent, I was able to type on the keyboard really easily and fast and all that.
I totally agree. So I guess I'm a little bit old enough. I took typing class in elementary school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I guess it was phasing out right then and there, but that was probably the most useful class because I can type fast now. I know I can do it without looking, you know what I mean? Yep. And then it was always fun to try and beat your typing score, right? Like in under a minute, right? How many words can you get down? But I'm
a hunter. I never learned it.
We use actual typewriters though, so if you messed up, you got to use the whiteout to get it out.
I didn't use the typewriters. I used the big keyboards. They were like this thick though. Yeah. But no, that's great. That is great. So we're pretty much in the middle of the episode. We like to do a segment called the Hella Misguided segment. Hella because we're Bay Area natives. And in this segment, I want you to kind of give me a summary of what you would tell your 18-year-old self. If you were to write yourself a letter at 18 years old, what would you say? Because, a lot of us want guidance. A lot of us need a good teacher, right? A lot of us need good parents to kind of guide us on what to expect from the world.
You want to start?
Ooh. I would tell my 18-year-old self to take a break. Like,
okay.
So actually it's funny because when I was going through the college interview process, someone asked me what I would do if I didn't get in college for a year. And I freaked out. Like I had no idea what to do if I didn't go to college right away. Like it just filled me with this fear of failure that I had done something wrong.
Yeah.
But knowing now what I would say it's okay to take some time off and to fail at things. Like you're not going to be successful 100% of the time. And you actually learn more from your mistakes than you do from your successes. So
absolutely,
be kind to yourself.
And a lot of people these days are so scared to fail. And I'm not sure why. Like, is it because of society pressure? Like, are we not supposed to fail? Like, I'll give it up, but like my generation is kind of, promoting to take risk, I would say, right? They're more financial aware. They're more, out there. Let's be entrepreneurs. Let's start businesses, right? But why do you guys think the majority of people are scared to fail?
I think you just see all these examples of people who fail and they end up, online at the food bank, or they're desperately looking for a job. And so they end up taking any job they can because they have to pay the bills. And you're just shown bad examples of what happens when you fail, instead of looking at the good examples of when you fail, because, you didn't take that job, or you got fired from your first job and now you're looking for a new job that turns out to be a better job. Like, you don't really hear stories about the good things that happen.
Yeah.
You just hear the bad things that happen.
It could also, there's a saying that the last generation is sort of the American Idol generation, where kids were sort of put into a position where the parents always said that they were amazing and awesome. And, you see some examples, they call it American Idol syndrome or whatever, because they would go on American Idol and think they were amazing, but they a lot of times weren't really.
Or it's like the give your kid a trophy for third place, or
right,
stuff like
exactly.
that. It's like right.
Or just for participating.
Yeah.
And so maybe a lot of kids just feel like they're letting their parents down if they fail, or they're not really living up to their potential. But yeah, I think it's definitely good to fail. Put yourself out there. I think Allison also hit the nail on the head. Like, there's definitely a fear of, if you do fail, is this going to ruin the rest of your life financially? How are you going to get yourself back on your feet? The one good thing, though, and something that young people should really, feel good about, is that when you're young, that is the time to take certain types of risks, calculated risks. But the reason is you have so much time to make up for it. So if you're investing or trying to start a business or what have you, if it does kind of fail, you learn from it. And you have decades, hopefully, knock on wood, but you should have decades left to recover from that. Whereas if you took a really big risk and failed when you were 65 or 70, you might not be able to recover from that. But
absolutely. Hey, it all goes back to investing, because it's like you invest riskier when you're younger, and you're not going to be investing in risky stocks when you're 70 years old, right?
Right.
But yeah, no, I totally agree. Is that what you would tell your 18-year-old self?
Yeah, I was trying to think of what I would actually tell my 18-year-old self, and I think in a lot of ways I would just tell myself to continue to do what I was doing. When I was 18, I was actually a sophomore in college already. I was a little young.
Oh, got a genius over here, huh?
Yeah, my parents they put me in kindergarten when I was 4, and so I was always a year ahead of everybody, or a year younger. And
you think that worked better for you? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Do you think that worked better, or in your favor? Yeah.
That's one of the things I've thought about. I actually wish they would not have done that, because it made it, in some ways, it was a positive, because I had to really push myself to keep up with kids that were a year older. But I think if I would have been with my peers, I would have been able to do better in things like sports and stuff like that. Because when you're like 13, 12, and you're competing with all the kids that are a year older, it's a little tougher,
Yep.
And I was lucky. I was a little bit bigger than kids my age, but at least taller. So I was able to sort of fit in. Like a lot of kids didn't know I was younger. But anyway, so I was a little ahead of the game. In sophomore year in college, I also did an internship with IBM for 6 months. That was when I was 18. And so those were things that were a little scary at the time. And this kind of goes back to taking those risks. I was like, let me just take take that 6 months, it was in Connecticut at the time, and just take that risk. I'm going to leave school. I'm going to leave all my friends for 6 months, but this could be something really cool for my resume.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing is travel and do things like that. That's why we're so into travel now, because we didn't do it as much when we were younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're just taking advantage of the stuff you missed out on.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. So how'd you guys come up with the movement, Retire by 45?
That's really all Dylan's.
That was me.
That was me.
So
he was in marketing, remember?
When we first, I'll try to give you a relatively succinct answer.
Okay.
When we first got laid off, we actually started a different blog. It was called Experienceify, and it was about having.
I like Retire by 45 better.
Yeah. Trying to explain that, but it was a little bit different. It was about traveling and stuff. But one of the blog posts that I wrote was about retiring early, and it got a lot of buzz. And I was like, maybe this is kind of a topic that I should focus on a little bit more. And, I just went and saw what domains were available, and Retire by 40 was already taken. So we retired around like 43. So I was like, Retire by 45. It sounds good. It's easy to say, it's easy to understand.
Yeah.
And we actually did it. So boom. Yeah. That was how that was born.
Nice.
And, like Allison mentioned earlier, we didn't know anything about the movement until like the FIRE movement when we first launched it. But then we actually found out about it on a podcast. Somebody asked us to be on their podcast. They saw our website, and then they started talking about the FIRE movement, and we got into it more.
And we're like, oh, well, since you're aware of the FIRE movement, and Dylan is texting me on the side, have you heard what is FIRE? I'm like, I have no idea. Let's go to the trusty search engine and what is FIRE? You get like all kinds of flame related things. And it took us a little bit of time to figure out what it was. And we're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we did do that.
So you guys retire at around 43. And you start this movement. Now, how are you marketing yourselves to kind of guide others? Like you obviously want to share your story and success on that. It is possible to do this. So how are you getting to other parents, other people?
How are we getting the word out?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was actually working, like I mentioned, I was in marketing, but I had really big budgets. At one point I was managing a $30 million a year budget for online marketing. And so when we started this, I didn't want to spend money on it. So I didn't want to really spend money on Facebook and Google and all that. I just wanted to like put out good content and see if I can, make it go sort of organic, sort of grow organically.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done. I mean, our site isn't huge, but I mean, it's gotten enough traction now that it's led to, things like this, podcasts, book opportunities, speaking opportunities, things like that, things that are just fun for us. Like this whole thing is a big hobby for us, really.
Yeah.
But the way that we do it, the way that I sort of do it is for me, it's all about first putting out really good content. So that's something I've mentioned to your audience. It's like, don't go so much for quantity, really focus on the quality, in my opinion. If you're a blogger, some people pump out like tons of blog posts, maybe they're like 500 words, 1,000 words, but there's not a ton of substance there.
Yep.
I take a different approach. I go for like 2,000 words, 2,500 words, and I try to pack in a ton of information. And Allison and I work on these blog posts together. So we put both of our heads together and we try to put content together that's really interesting. And it may not resonate for everybody, obviously.
Yeah.
But we want it to be a little bit more meaningful and things that they're not necessarily going to see everywhere,
Yeah.
So we draw on a lot of personal experience and that sort of thing. So that's one of the big things. And, Allison's been getting into Instagram lately. So, pick your poison in terms of like your social media. You find a couple of things that work well for you and you like.
You have to get into TikTok. I think your guys' personality, you guys have a good personality that's like outgoing. And if you're like just literally like vlogging your travel trips, your hiking trips, and just, I think the amount of reach you can get to like, just for example, 2 nights ago I posted a video on TikTok of me like hiding under a bed from playing hide and seek with my kid, right? And it's just a sound, it's not my actual kid sound, but and the kid was counting and he was skipping so many numbers, and all I did in the comment was say, when you're playing hide and seek with your kid and you realize he needs to go to school, right?
Nice.
And overnight I had like 30 comments. Right now I'm at 2,000 views, right? And I've posted like 10 videos before that, and they're like less than 200 views. So it literally just happens. And I think like when, and you know, you do the hashtags, parents of TikToks. Every time I do parents of TikToks, dads of TikToks, it always goes viral, no matter what.
That's interesting.
So
yeah, we played around with TikTok a little bit with our book. We went to a playground and I was like,
yeah,
was
handing the book out.
yeah.
I almost fell off a swing because I was trying to hold the book and swing and talk at the same time. It was.
And then I tried to overlay this like Pink Floyd song about money on top of it. It was fun, but I mean, that's a good example. Actually, it's funny. There's an author group on Facebook, and one of the authors in there swears by TikTok. And I thought it was interesting, like for an author for a book. Like, and he was like, "Yeah, I never got this much traction on anything until I got into TikTok." So
it's amazing. Because they haven't figured out the algorithm yet, right? Like Instagram, it's super hard on Instagram now to kind of get your stuff everywhere. It only goes to a certain, friend group, right? TikTok, it has the ability to explode and go everywhere with just one video. So definitely invest your time in that. I mean, you have the time.
That's it.
Yeah.
All you have to do is vlog yourself on a hike or something, say something funny here and there, and there you go. But yeah. Cool. And let's go ahead and dive into the book, since we just talked about it in your quirky video. But let's go ahead and dive into Investing for Kids: How to Save, Invest, and Grow Money. How'd you come up
Here it
with
is,
that?
actually. So
Do
you want us to just tell you a little bit about it?
Yep. Why are you writing a book to kids? How'd that come up?
Want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we don't have kids. So we had finished our first book, Start Your Fire, and our publisher, a local publisher in Emeryville, said, "Oh, we've got this other book that we think you'd be great to write it." And so we submitted a writing sample, and I guess they liked our style, which is funny because we don't know how to talk to kids. We don't have kids we don't really have kids in our lives. So it was kind of a struggle trying, honestly, to create content that, the age range for the book is from 8 to 12. And so, as an 8-year-old developmentally, there are concepts that I don't know that they really understand as well as they would if they were 12.
So then why even try to write a book to an 8-year-old? If like it's so hard to get them to sit down and read. Like, I hate reading now. So
yeah, I think at that point we wanted it to be an experience that kids could go through with their parents, their guardians, their grandparents, whatever adult they live with, and kind of be able to talk with them and have their parent or have their adult person, because we don't assume that people have parents. But we wanted them to kind of have a partnership with their adult.
Is that the reason for the problem solving in there? I love how you're like, go solve this problem, etc. You know what I mean? It's kind of an interactive thing they can do with those guardians.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, the challenge for us was we wanted it to be informative. We wanted it to be fun. We wanted to have like those kind of things, activities that would get them engaged. You really have to do things to really learn. It's one thing to read it on a page, but a few activities, if you have some quizzes, if you have some puzzles, it makes it a little more interesting, and it gets you to think a little bit more about, how to apply some of these concepts. So for us, it was actually it was a really great challenge, and it was a lot of fun. And I kind of had a feeling this book was going to take off. And it's done so much better than we expected, because our first book, which was like Allison mentioned, Start Your Fire, was all about financial independence, retiring early, and
kind of our sweet spot.
Yeah, it's our sweet spot, and it flowed right out of us. It was actually fairly easy to write because it's stuff we blog about. And that one, it's done okay, but it hasn't sold a ton of copies. But the Investing for Kids just went crazy, and it got tons of great reviews.
How long have you been number one?
I'm sorry.
So how long have you been number one in the children's category?
Oh man, it's almost like as far back as I can remember. I don't know how, like at one point I just started looking at the ratings and the rankings and all that. And I was like, hey, Allison, we're number one in children's money. And then we were number one in another similar category. And ever since I looked at that, it was probably like a month or so after the book came out, we've always stayed there. And
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's weird. One day I saw somebody move ahead of us. And I was like, oh, maybe that's the end of our run, and we're just going to start slipping away. And like the next day, we were back to number one. But
did you have a marketing plan? You're the marketing guru. Like, did you just release it and say, let's see what it does, and it really did well, or did you actually go out there and invest?
Yeah. So this time around, we did do a lot more marketing than we did in our first book, and that probably helped. We really, so if you or your listeners are into writing, some of the things you want to do, you definitely want to get as many reviews as possible. So start off with all the people you know before your book even goes out there, and say, hey guys, please, I'll give you a free copy or whatever it takes. Read my book and you put a review on Amazon, and get as many people to do that as possible. The more reviews, the better. And even reviews that aren't 5-star, believe it or not, the more reviews quantity wise, the more Amazon will.
Can you get, how do you do that for someone who's wanting to publish a book? How do you, you put it on Amazon, but how do you get an editorial review or a friend review before it's published?
What we did was, do you want to talk about that?
I mean, part of it is we work with the marketing group with our publisher. So they did a phenomenal job kind of giving us a plan of what to do. And so we made sure that we were pushing it out every day on social media. You can actually get people, like if you people in the space, or like that you're going to be in knitting, and that there are knitter blogs or whatever, you can go reach out to those folks who are the influencers in your niche, and ask them to do a review. And they can do either an editorial review on Amazon, where you can set up your book page ahead of time and do pre-sales, and they'll do Dave Ramsey said that this book was great because blah, 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 blah.
Do they have to have an Amazon account to do a review?
To do an editorial, you do not.
Okay.
It could just be anyone, because that's the space that you control, and you can put in, whatever you want, or whatever.
You can literally just put in a review that you made up, right? Like is that how easy it is?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you don't attribute it to someone, but not to say Dave Ramsey said this, Dave Ramsey didn't say.
Dave Ramsey, Mark Cuban,
right?
Just a list of names.
Exactly. But in the actual reviews, you have to have, I think you have, according to the Amazon requirements, you have to be a US based customer.
Okay.
You have to have bought $50 worth of of stuff on Amazon in the previous year. Otherwise, they don't let you put a review in. I think those are the only two criteria.
Oh, the third criteria is you can't have the same last name, because they don't want you to have a family member do it. So if your last name is Jones, I don't know, that might be a little bit of a problem. If your last name is Smith.
You just have 15 Joneses reviewing your book. They're like,
exactly.
Family loves him.
But we also had a little bit of a head start too, because we had the blog, and so we had an email list and all that. So we push it out to all the people on our email list. But to one of your earlier questions about it, our publisher did send out physical copies to a lot of people. They also had digital copies so that people could actually read it beforehand and get the reviews up. So there's a lot of different strategies you can use.
Right. We went to Facebook and asked people if they were, especially parents of kids in that
Facebook groups.
Yes, we went to a lot of Facebook groups. I went to all of my high school and my college group pages because they all have kids in the 8 to 12 range, or they nieces and nephews or whatever. So that actually helped us get a bunch of reviews. And I mean, I think our publisher asked for 20 or 25, and we ended up with 30 at that point. So we were pretty excited. We thought 30 is a pretty good number. Yeah. And then it kept going. And I think part of it is that we released the book about 10 days before Christmas.
Oh, okay.
So it's like the perfect Christmas present or holiday present for people, because people are always looking for something to get kids, and it was it's like under $10, so it's like the perfect stocking stuffer.
Who's thinking of getting their kid a book about money? Like,
I know, right?
You know what I mean? It's like I don't even know how do I would be like, the first thought is toys, not a book.
Right.
So it's like,
it's interesting. And I think also maybe with the pandemic, people are inside a lot. So maybe they were thinking, I got to give my kids something to do, something to read. And I think it also the pandemic also hit everyone's pocketbooks so hard. And, when the pandemic first started, the stock market went way down. So I think people got really anxious about money and finances and stocks. And so when our book started getting out there, it's like, oh, we got to teach our kids about this stuff. It's really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. I love it. Well, that's great. I appreciate you guys kind of going into detail about, every question. It really helps kind of break it down. And that's exactly what you guys did in the book. Is you guys, the way the book is laid out is super easy to understand for an adult, for a kid. But it just makes you think about money differently. And I love that. So I'm glad it's doing well for you guys. Really.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. The fact that adults like it actually is sort of like cherry on top of the sundae. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from adults who are like, wow, I learned a lot from this too, reading it to my kids. So
most definitely. Well, yeah, that's great. We're going to go ahead and move on to wrapping up the show. The way I like to do it is with a section called Guided Conclusions, where I ask you a question. It could be funny, quirky, serious, anything. Today's question is going to be, if you could say 3 words to the person listening to inspire or motivate them, what would it be? You have 3 words.
Ooh, wow. That's a really good question.
You gotta guide them. We're trying to guide.
I'll go back to the previous thing we talked about. Fail forward frequently.
Ooh, I like that. The 3 F's.
A little alliteration there. Yeah.
So. It's like you wrote books before or something.
I'll stick with that answer. That's
all right. Come on, you gotta give one, Dylin. Come on.
Oh, I gotta give one.
Yeah, you gotta give one.
Go for it. So again, it's sort of the same concept of just, it's like the Nike slogan, just do it. I mean, especially for your audience being younger. And I don't mean like do something crazy that's going to get you, thrown in jail or
throw all your money in Forex.
Yeah. Don't do anything crazy, but go for it. And, if I can just do a really quick story. We were listening to a podcast yesterday, and one of the guys on there is he's financial samurai or financial mad scientist. Anyway, he had a really cool story about when he started doing things that were a little bit more crazy. And he put it in this way: I wanted to think about a world where I either did do something cool and crazy or where I didn't. And I'm always in the world where I didn't, but I wanted to test out the world where I did. And I thought that was kind of a cool way to think about it.
Yeah. It's like kind of almost like the Black Mirror episodes on Netflix, if you've seen those. It's almost like the what if, or like it will be.
Right. Don't live with regrets. So give it a shot.
Yeah, I love that. Don't live with regrets. That might be the title of this. Good job.
Right.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys coming up here. I really do. It's Saturday, mid afternoon, beautiful weather. You guys should be hiking right now.
We're gonna go for a hike. I did a swim before the podcast. Now it's time for a hike.
There you go. There you go. Well, do you want to share all your social medias and where people can reach you? Your website, your books, etc.
Yeah, the easiest way is to go to our website, retireby45.com, because on there you'll see everything else. You'll see our books, you'll see our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn handles, and you'll be able to contact us on our email.
Okay, perfect. Do you want to shout out? Do you have different social medias like Instagram or whatever? Your Instagram?
No, we predominantly do it through Instagram and Twitter. We're retire_by_45.
Perfect. Okay. Cool. Well, I appreciate you guys
on either of those.
Okay.
As well.
Sounds good. Thank you. Well, that's it, everyone. Thank you for listening. Make sure you like, and subscribe and share this episode. We really appreciate it. And make sure you go check out retireby45.com and learn more about Allison and Dylin. That's it. This is the Misguided Podcast, where we intend to guide you to a better future. My name is Juwan. I'm sitting here with Allison and Dylin from the Bay Area. Thank you.